there's this fear of like you're not going to be good enough if you show up as your real self. And so we stay in this lane of safety in order to still have relationships and still try to hold on to these connections because we as humans need that. But that's not the real connection. The banyan tree is a tree unlike others, a representation of resilience and strength through its ability to overcome the status quo and fulfill its purpose.
It knew that it was meant for something bigger and didn't allow the limits of other trees to confine its growth.
And our story looks similar. I'm Leslie.
And I'm Mindy. And our hope is that every one of our listeners learns to take up all the space they were created to, just like the banyan tree.
Welcome back to the Banyan Effect podcast. I am your co-host, Leslie, and today Mindy and I are continuing with our book club of the book Worthy. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see me holding it up right now. It's an incredible book by Jamie Kern Lima, and it talks all about self-worth and how we find it and how we use it to really drive success and fulfillment in our life. We have been spending the last couple of episodes working through these chapters. So if you are just joining us today and this is the first episode that you are listening to, I would highly suggest going back a couple and following us along on this book club journey from the very beginning of chapter 1 of this book. So before we dive in today, if you haven't yet already, we are trying really hard to grow this little podcast of ours. As we get further and further into this journey, we get just a little bit better every day and are really finding our stride and what fulfills us in this podcast and the purpose of the message that we need to deliver. And we feel so strongly of the impact that this message can have on not just us, but everybody around us. So if you could help us share that message with your friends and your family, we would love any episode shares. And if you haven't already, subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. All right, we will dive in. Chapter 3, I don't know about you, Mindy, but I really loved chapter 3. It was like short and sweet, but so impactful. I actually found myself, I have like pages highlighted because everything was so impactful. But chapter 3 is titled, You're Not Crazy, You're Just First, and is really getting at the idea of you are the only you in the world and you are the first you. And so showing up as you and the things that you believe in doesn't make you crazy. It makes you first because there's been no combination of DNA and experience the same as each single one of us. And I just love the idea right off the bat that we each have our own purpose and experience and vision into the world.
Yeah, when I was reading this book, I happened to be with my 12-year-old. And so I was reading it out loud to her, and she was a little bit confused. She's like, what does that mean? And the way that I explained it to her, which I feel this so many times, the way that I explain something to my kids, I'm like hearing myself explain it to them. And I'm also listening myself because sometimes we do need a 12-year-old version of a concept. And I think this is one of them because it's very simple, but so many of us are still held up by being the first us. And so the way that I explained it to my daughter was that, you being the first doesn't mean that you have to come up with a brand new concept, invention, or idea in order to be you. It just means that whatever you do in life, I mean, obviously we're not the first people to put podcasts out into the world, but we are the first ones to have the partnership that we do because of who you are and who I am and the past experience that we have together and the conversations that we're going to have and et cetera, et cetera. And so I just explained it to her that it just means that whatever you do in life, that you have to be okay with being the first person to do it your way. And it's going to feel scary. I mean, you think about social media. So many times, we've talked about this a handful of times on the podcast. So many times when I'm trying to figure out who I want to show up as or how I want to do my marketing for my listings, I turn to social media. And I'm really, really trying to break that habit because the way that I'm supposed to do my job and my life, I'm not going to find on social media. I'm not going to find on the internet. I have to turn inward and figure out what it means for me. But that isn't, I think, a lot easier said than done. I think that we all want acceptance. And so I think it's easy to just go after anything like, well, I'm just going to do it like this person does it or that person does it, and then I'll be successful and accepted. What she's talking about in this chapter is that is the opposite of what we should be doing.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't remember which episode it was, but recently we talked about how the answers are inside of you. And I feel like this chapter really got at that. I mean, I even like look around my office and I have all of these different leadership books that I read to try to learn how to become a better leader. This chapter really helped me. Like, these books are important, and don't get me wrong, I have learned a lot from them, but you have to be able to figure out how to apply your unique lens on that. So I think about like showing up at work and wanting to grow in my career. And so you're watching the people around you and you start to adopt some of their behaviors and the way that they lead, and you're taking advice from them and you're doing all of these things. And that is great. Like, learning from other people is still really important. It's so easy to get stuck in the like, I'm going to do it just like that. Or this book told me to do this, so I'm going to mimic it exactly. And showing up as your unique self and looking at all of your experiences and applying your personality and your strengths and layering it into the things that you're learning allows you to show up in a more connected and authentic way, ultimately creating more connection with the people that you're working with.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times too, we do this because we think that we're going to be able to make other people around us feel more comfortable. Like, if you lead the way that they're maybe used to, or the way the last leader did, or fill in the blank. If you do X, Y, or Z one way, it will make the people around you feel more comfortable. And one of the things that the book says is, I mastered dimming my own light to make people around me feel comfortable. And that really resonated to me, because one thing that I know I have done in the past is I have ordered food off of a menu. I have ordered drinks off of a menu. I have literally done things, eaten things, drank things that I didn't want to, just to make the people around me feel more comfortable. Health and wellness is something that I've always been really passionate about, but I never was able to stay consistent in my bold decisions around my health, because I was always with other people, and I was always trying to make those people, whoever I was with, comfortable. If that meant that they drank way too much when I was with them, guess what? I drank way too much. And I did it to some degree mostly to make them feel comfortable. So I was like stealing from who I am, stealing my own identity and dimming my own light to try to make somebody else feel comfortable. That's a problem.
Yeah.
And so I love that she calls this out, because I really, really resonated to that. And this is an area that I've had to improve upon, because, we've talked about my health concerns. And so at one point I didn't have a choice. But what makes me really mad is, if I would have read this in this book, I mean, this book just came out, so I couldn't have, it's not her fault or my fault. But if I would have known this and had this aha moment 10 years ago, my health probably wouldn't be where it is right now, because I would have started living my life for me a long time ago. But here we are. And I'm super grateful that I have the lesson now. And I just encourage anybody out there that's listening to really think about what things are you saying? What things are you doing? What are you consuming? Whether it's, food, drinks, products, Amazon things, we're like set up for failure with influencers all over the place, like constantly feeding us, to consume and consume. And it's so just take some time to think about that. Like, what are you doing in your life that's not authentic, and you're just doing it to make other people around you feel comfortable?
Yeah, totally. I think I love that perspective, because I feel like we can show up as somebody different in different situations, whether in social settings or work or whatever it is, to make others feel comfortable. And then I think we can also show up in all of these situations to make ourselves feel comfortable. So I think about like, there's this, as humans, we want connection. Like, that is innate inside of us, that we need connection. And I think sometimes we show up as who we think people expect us to show up as, or how to best fit in that crowd. And it's taking us away from who we really are. But we're doing that. So we're showing up as someone that we're not, as a way to feel connected and fit in with those people. But really, what connection is like showing up as your authentic self, and traumas and challenges and vulnerabilities and your quirky, weird self, bringing all of it to the table. And that's what's going to fuel real connection. But it's like we do the opposite. We show up and act like others in order to fit in, to build connection. But I think subconsciously our bodies know that this is not a real connection, and it doesn't work. But then you do the opposite. You drop the fear, you drop that divided sort of state that you're living in, and show up and embrace who you really are. And you don't get ousted from the group. In fact, the group does the exact opposite, and you really, truly develop real, raw connection.
I'm going to read a quote from the book. It's on page 63. If you're watching on YouTube, you get to see me read out of this book. When we don't morph who we truly are to fit in, and we show up authentically, it can be worrisome to others who live in a comfort zone where fitting in is the path to acceptance.
I really relate to that quote, and I have just a quick story to share of applying this to real life. My husband and I have been married for 15 years now, and one of the things that we have struggled with in the past is not sharing our struggles with one another, and out of fear that the struggles are going to cause disconnection or challenges in our relationship. So one of the things that we've talked about is, I want the feedback. I want you to tell me when I am doing something you like, or when I am doing something that you don't like. I want you to tell me when you're struggling. And one of the things that we talk about is, it's not the struggle. Like, I don't care about the struggle. I don't care what is happening. I mean, I do care, but it's not going to impact our relationship. Sharing those struggles and being real and raw and vulnerable is actually what's going to help us build a stronger connection. And so it's like this fear of holding back, or the fear of not sharing something that you're struggling with your significant other, is not keeping the relationship strong by keeping that sort of at bay. It's making your relationship ends up being stronger on the other end of it by sharing those struggles, because all of a sudden you've like peeled back another layer of connection, and your like souls are connected at the deepest level. And that's what makes that real, genuine connection between two people.
Yeah, I mean, they should just our husbands should just look at what happened with you and I. Like, we locked ourselves in a cabin one weekend and we're like, here's all my garbage. What do you got? And you're like, well, here's all my garbage. And then we came out of there like best friends forever, like arm in arm, like nothing can come between us, because we were both vulnerable and opened up. And the connection that we got out of that, because we were honest and raw with each other, is unshakable. Yeah. It's just, it helps create this relationship and this connection that you can't compare with anything else. And that's what I want in my marriage and in my relationship, is in any relationship, really. Like, I am okay paring back the friendships I have so that I can really be more, have a deeper connection with the people that I do spend my time with, because, you and I are both in a very, very busy season of life with the ages of our kids, and we're in the height of our careers and things like that. And so time is our biggest asset right now, right? And so if I'm going to give that up for anybody, I want there to be some like real connection, not just, surface level pretending like we've both got it all together kind of thing. And, the other thing that I will share that Kevin and I, my husband and I, have also struggled with, is not just sharing the struggles, but also sharing the excitement. Like, and it happens both ways. So he'll have something really positive and exciting happen at work, and I won't hear about it. And it's like, we're supposed to stay in this lane of safety, right? Like, we don't want to share anything that's going to maybe make somebody else feel less than, but we don't want to share anything that's going to make anybody think that that we're not perfect either. It's like this, what are we doing here? And I'm guilty of it too. Like, I'll talk about a listing I got or whatever, and he'll be like, oh, well, when did that happen? Like, you didn't share that with me. And so not only are we not sharing, I share all of my struggles with him, trust me, but not only does he not necessarily want to feel comfortable sharing his struggles with me or bringing those to me. But he and I both forget to share the happy, exciting things that actually deserve some celebration too. So, I mean, it goes, I think, both ways. And it ultimately goes back to this idea of keeping everybody comfortable, and I think that I do this in my friendships too. Like, I don't share wins with work or whatever, because I don't want it to come across like I'm bragging, or, you know what I mean? It's like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
Like, we're all just like living with these, like, in this like safety lane of like, it's almost like we're all trying to dumb down emotions, whether they're good or bad, or like, let's just stay indifferent.
Yeah.
Kind of.
It's like there's this fear of like, you're not going to be good enough if you show up as your real self. Wounds, traumas, scars, thoughts, feelings, experiences. Like, you're not good enough if you reveal that. And so we stay in this lane of safety in order to still have relationships and still try to hold on to these connections, because we as humans need that. But that's not the real connection. And so it's this huge fear that if we show up with all of the baggage that we've got behind us, all of a sudden it's like we're not worthy of these relationships and things in our life. And I think as soon as you can like break through that, you discover that it's like, that's what actually makes you worthy, is all of these experiences and life traumas and challenges along the way are what make you worthy, makes you.
Yeah. And when you do step into all of that, that's where the change makers come into play. Yeah. Like, in every generation, right? There's you've heard people say before, like, well, I'm the first in my family to go to college, or I'm the first person in my family, I'm the only person in my family who doesn't drink or isn't an alcoholic, or whatever it may be. Somebody's got to be first. Why not you?
Yes.
Right? Like, those, they're the generational cycle breakers. They're the ones that break addictions, and they're the ones that go after life. Like, I used to be sad. I think that I always felt like the black sheep in my family. And what I've learned is, I think I'm the only one that's really being me. And yeah, it's scary. And sometimes it has looked like rejection, because if you want to live a really great big life, there will be people that you are making feel uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And that's okay. I think that as soon as we stop living for other people, there will be people that you make uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And yay for you. You have arrived. Right. Because that's the point, right? Yeah. Like, now I'm like, yes, I'm the black sheep. I am the one falling flat on my face. Mm-hmm. Literally, last year I fell flat on my face multiple times. And here I am. I got right back up, and I've never been happier, and I've never been more excited for my future. Yeah. If I chose to live a safe, comfortable life that made everybody around me feel super comfortable, I wouldn't be falling flat on my face, but I also wouldn't be rising above either. Yeah. So I will take the falling on the face and then rising above any day, and in order to completely live an authentic, joyful, purposeful life. Yeah.
I love that. It's like, the ones who have succeeded are the ones who are authentic. And you can succeed to an extent while still being inauthentic to yourself, but you hit a wall. Mm-hmm. Just like we've talked about, like, your worth is your ceiling. So if you're not yourself and you're not living your authentic life, you're going to hit a wall. Maybe it leads to burnout in corporate America. Hi, that was me. Like, major burnout. But then as I take that step back, and I did fall, just like you, Mindy, it was like you pick back up the pieces and you trash the armor and you let it go, and you just show up and start to fuel who you really are. And like, that tiny voice inside of you that's saying you're meant for something more, and that other piece of you that's saying you're not fulfilled and you want all these other things, like, it just starts to go away, because you realize, like, all of a sudden you are just living your life. And look, now it's like, I've not only gotten through that wall, I've plowed through it. And now it's like this whole new world has been opened up on the other side of it.
She says in Worthy, be authentic, even if it means standing alone. And that's exactly what you're talking about. And I think sometimes we get forced into this by experiences that we go through. And that's where that whole mantra of don't waste the struggle comes in. And that's also where it's you and I are always saying that things are happening for us. A lot of times those things that are happening for us are disguised as disappointments and letdowns. But if we look backwards and we connect all the dots later on, we'll realize like, oh, I'm really glad that didn't work out.
Exactly.
I'm really glad that didn't happen. And I know for me, a lot of times the things that I'm most disappointed about are maybe because they hurt like my ego or my pride or something. And then you look back later and you're like, what? Why did I even want that or whatever? And it's like, because it was not authentic. Another thing that she says in that chapter is when you're the first, it can be so tempting to feel like there's something wrong with you. And that is 100% true. And again, it goes back to there's going to be people, and they may be people that are very, very close to you that are going to have opinions about what you're doing. They're not going to believe in you, or they're not going to understand why you're going after it. I think that a lot of my family in the past has thought that I'm just doing what I'm doing to go after money. And anybody that knows me knows that that's not what drives me. It's a side effect of doing what I do and working as hard as I work. And I'm okay with it because guess what? I love to vacation and I want to live a great, big, huge life. It's the only one I get. But I can't let the opinions of people, no matter how close they are to me, stop what I know in my heart. I can't let their opinions stop me from continuing to go after my dreams and my hopes and my goals and all of those things. I just finally am at a point in my life where I'm okay with being misunderstood, and the only opinion that I care about anymore is my own. And as long as I wake up every morning and I go to sleep every single night knowing that I am doing my very best and I am working hard and I'm caring for other people and doing holding on to my integrity like it is my lifeline, because it is. I don't care what you think.
Yeah. When you're making this pivot, right? So you recognize that you aren't showing up as your authentic self, and maybe you are people pleasing yourself into acceptance, or you're showing up in a certain way in order to fit in, to try to grow, or any of these things. And you recognize that. And I think a lot of, at least the women that we have talked to, Mindy, are in that state of recognizing that. And that is that feeling of I meant for something more. That pivot can be really scary. And you start to it's easy to play all of these movies or stories out in your head of what's going to happen if you start to say no to this, or you start to withdraw from this, or you show up loving something different than what you have typically showed up loving. And you play out all these terrible scenarios in your head. And I think what I have realized is, do some things sort of fall out? Yeah, but you realize that it's fine. And then do new things come in and they bring you joy and hope and fun, and you embrace those things. And then another new thing comes in and you experience the same thing. So it's these traumatic stories that we play out in our head when we're trying to make that shift are not real. We are playing those out of fear. But what happens when you're discovering yourself is that maybe the people that you hang around start to shift. Maybe your job changes, but it's not a big deal. Because the exchange is you're finding yourself, and there's this found freedom on the other side. And then you get there and you're like, what the heck was I so scared of that whole time?
Yeah, I recently saw a meme, and it had this picture, and it said, it was comparing two different stories basically. And it was, one of them was just this, it was chaos. And this other one was just this beautiful picture. And it was would your life look like if you knew that it was all going to work out in the end? In hindsight, it's wow, how many times are we so worried about stuff? And then it all works out. And it's what would my life be like instead of worrying about it that whole time? If I would have just enjoyed the journey that whole time, the result ends up being the same, likely.
Yeah.
If nothing else, it'll turn out better when you just enjoy it, right? And I know that that's kind of a cliche that's talked about over and over, enjoy the journey. And it's yeah, whatever. But it's also really true.
Yeah.
If you just believe that it's going to work out. I mean, and here's the thing, unless you wake up dead, it's all worked out. Everything that you've ever been through. I mean, it may not have been the prettiest thing, but it works out.
Yeah.
To some degree.
Yeah. And if you allow it, it doesn't only work out, but it gives you this beautiful life that you get to now experience because of it. Being on the other side of this now, I do have those moments of why didn't I do this 10 years ago? I was so scared to be myself, I people pleased my way into acceptance. I people pleased my way into friendships. I chameleoned my way into a really successful career. And don't get me wrong, I love all of those things. Now it's like 10 times better. You make that pivot and you lean into yourself. And I keep saying it, but it's like this huge sense of freedom. And I had no idea what I was getting into. And I made up every scenario in my head that I possibly could of what's going to go wrong. I'm going to lose my job because they're not going to like who I am. And then I'm going to lose my house. And oh my God, we're going to be on the streets. And what are my kids going to grow up thinking about me? I played out the whole movie in my head and none of that happened. I have a stronger relationship with my kids now. I have a beautiful home that I've always dreamt of. I have a career that's strong. I'm exploring this podcast and we're going to grow it to as far as we can possibly grow it. And none of those fears played out. Not a single one.
Which is most often the case. And it goes back to the reframe. And that's a really important part of our day-to-day life of reframing. I mean, I think it was the last episode that I talked about same kind of thing. Like I was worried is my team going to think that I don't care about them because I'm starting this podcast? And then it dawned on me that starting this podcast means I'm going to be pushing myself to limits on personal growth that I'm not even pushing myself to now, which means I'm going to become a better leader for them. But I had to reframe that because otherwise the fear was going to minimize what we were doing and my efforts to market it and, things like that. And so it's something that we need to be really, really aware of is where those moments are, those opportunities, those little nudges that we feel to go after something where fear is getting in the way and reframing that, which the book talks at length about this and tells you how to even do it is something that we just have to keep in practice.
Yeah. Yeah. So show up, show up as yourself, bring along all those experiences, all the traumas, all the messiness, layer in your gifts. What are the things that you're really good at and show up as that person. And then you see all of these like beautiful things unfold in front of you. You do become a better version of yourself and your ceiling gets way higher because now you're worthy. You believe you're worthy of it and you're showing up as yourself at the same time. It's a wonderful feeling.
Yeah. So to wrap up this episode, we want to leave you with something from the book that says your first can be a great tool. And just meaning that when you do start to step into those scary moments and those authentic steps that you're taking in life, it starts to feel a little bit scary. And maybe you're even getting some feedback from friends or family who are saying you're crazy or you're fill in the blank. Just remember, you're not crazy. You're not any of those things that they may be saying. You're just first. So it's going to look a lot different. So use that tool as you start to walk this path of feeling worthy of attaining everything in your life that you want and desire because you deserve it. We hope you have enjoyed today's episode and found some valuable insights. If you liked what you heard, we'd love it if you would hit the subscribe button.
We love hearing from our listeners, so drop us a comment, share your thoughts on social, or review wherever you listen to podcasts. Your feedback keeps us going and helps us bring you the content you want to hear.
As always, we appreciate your time and company. Until next time, stay curious, stay inspired, and keep listening to the Banyan Effect